Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It's not a podcast, it's a phenomenon. Here are your hosts, former Fox News political correspondent Joel Waldman and his mom Carmela, a licensed marriage therapist and Holocaust survivor.
So we're driving over here, and you say to me the first thing before your ass hits the seat of the car, as usual, because you're always giving me shit to do and things to think about, which is why I have OCD, which is why I have anxiety, which is why I'm always high stress, because you slave drive me. Like, it's literally like a metaphorical whip on my ass every day, 5,000 times a day. But the first thing you say to me today is, when I'm actually calm, you say, Joel, we need a message for our podcast. Which I agree with. What was your message, Karm?
I never give you, I told you, you inherited the anxiety from your daddy.
No, I didn't. It was
Trust me, he was
environmental
anxious.
From you.
Okay, I don't think so.
Okay.
I refuse to take this on.
What was we do need kind of a theme. So we are trying to really promote this show. Our guest who's coming up had over 50,000 YouTube subscribers, and he was telling us he was picking up 1,000 a week. We could pick up about one every 6 months, which is not a very good thing to be proud of. So you said we need a theme. And what was your theme? Just to show people what I deal with.
You know what? When I proposed to brainstorm about it, he said, not now.
And what was your idea for a theme for our show?
Well, I thought this was the theme of my life, to really enjoy it. And life is beautiful.
Probably the worst theme I've ever.
Yes,
I don't even know what a theme.
Happiness doesn't
No, I do not even know what a theme is.
Ta-da!
You've got to be able to pitch our show in literally a second, like a gun-toting, Holocaust surviving, ass-kicking grandmother. Like that's a theme right there,
So
and that comes up on the show today. Anyway, we need to come up with something, and we need to get followers. We need a massive following. I don't know what we have to do.
We need a massive following, everybody. That's what we need.
We need a massive following. We'll be right back with a true American hero, retired Marine Corporal Brian Lupo, coming right up on the main schmooze.
Do you want to help my son? His company, Content Partners Media, specializes in brand video and content creation for innovative companies and others. Please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com and hire him. I repeat, please go to www.contentpartnersmedia.com.
Welcome back to Surviving the Survivor. It's time now for the main schmooze.
Karm, I can feel it, I can sense it, I can see it on your face. You're nervous because we've got a trained killer coming up right now in the news schmooze. Admit it.
I have to tell you the truth. You are wrong for once. You are only once, but you're wrong because I think he's not here, so I have nothing to fear.
The minute you saw him,
no,
he is sort of the antithesis of a nerdy Jewish guy like me. Looks like a badass, and you got a little nervous.
He has a very sweet face.
We're joined right now by Brian Lupo. Brian, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you guys?
Excellent. Thank you. Let me tell the audience the little I know about you, but I actually met you doing a story in reaction to what's going on in Afghanistan. Brian Lupo is a retired corporal in the United States Marine Corps. He served 2 tours of duty essentially over in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2012. He currently has a show called the Cannabis Conservative, which you generally don't always hear those 2 words together. We have a big liberal that runs our studio. He wants some of that cannabis. And I don't need to tell you, Brian has one of the sickest beard games going on and one of the best backdrops in the business. And he's got a wife, but even better, he's got 2 awesome dogs, Tango and Johnny, right? Right, Brian?
Yep, they're sitting right over here in the studio.
So welcome. Let me start with something that I have not really stopped thinking of since I talked to you last week, and probably something that you're not that excited to talk about. But so I did speak to you and one other veteran last week in reaction to what's going on. And this is for my day job in Afghanistan. And you were showing me some pictures, and you said to me, there's a shot of you with kind of like sandbags and like a little half a wall thing going on, and you and a fellow Marine, and you said, hey, you see that building way out there? It's like 450 yards away. And I was like, yeah. He was like, I got someone right between the eyes. What happened that day?
Yeah, so we were out at a fob we had called PB Girk. It was actually named for a couple Marines that we had in our unit that got blown up, stepped on IEDs, double amputees. Fortunately, the whole time we were over there, my platoon did not lose anybody, no KIAs, but we did have several Marines that stepped on IEDs and lost limbs and stuff. Well, we had this patrol base set up from our main fob, and we were sitting out there one day, and I was on post. I was lucky enough to be on post, which means I was tasked with security rather than actually filling sandbags and everything. So it was actually welcome to sit there and have to watch everything going on. And while we were out there filling these sandbags, we saw, I was on post. I saw with my binos, I saw a guy, several hundred yards away that kept staring at us with binoculars. And when we were in Afghanistan, binoculars were considered hostile. You weren't allowed to, watch us with binoculars, radios, cell phones, anything like that. It would be considered hostile. So when the guy finally realized that I was looking at him, he dropped down real quick, dropped down. A couple minutes go by and he pops back up. And then he saw me, dropped right back down. So he was definitely, surveilling us, in some form or fashion. Well, just earlier we had taken IDF, indirect fire, which usually you have a spotter that is calling in adjustments on the IDF. So we knew that there was somebody out there that was spotting our position. And so what I did is I moved position to another spot. There were some hostilities that took place, and I ended up getting cleared to engage this spotter, and took a shot. And a couple hours later, we had one of the local nationals that kind of sides with us a little bit, and he came back to our compound and knocked on the door, and we were talking to him, and he said, yeah, you guys just smoked one of the Taliban in this building over there, gone, done. And that was my shot. And I don't know if that guy was a spotter, but it's still one of those things that never really weighs. It's hard to explain. It just kind of eats you up a little bit when you think about having to do something like that. But we had just taken IDF, just before that. So got to protect our guys that were up there, building this structure, extremely vulnerable, no protection, no nothing. So you got to do what you got to do sometimes. Did the
Taliban? I assume they had snipers of their own. Do you think from that distance, could they have gotten one of your guys?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. They had snipers. The problem with snipers is it's not very, you got one shot and that's it. The Afghans themselves typically weren't the best snipers. The snipers, usually as far as we know, came from, we used to call them Chechnyan snipers. Mm-hmm. They would come from other countries, and they would be foreign fighters fighting alongside the Taliban. The Taliban themselves, we didn't really encounter any snipers that were worth calling snipers, if you will.
How does that happen? This is the kind of thing that I could talk about for 150 hours, mainly because I would never have the courage to be out there to do something. So I'm really intrigued by it. But how does the chain of command work in a situation like that? Because this is a guy that could potentially, who's hostile, who could potentially kill your guys. And now you see that he's a threat. How fast does something like that go down, and what kind of chain of command before you're given clearance to go after this guy?
Well, I ended up calling it in over the radio because back then I think I was a lance corporal. So I had people pointed above me. The highest ranking Marine on our fob that day was a sergeant. And I called him up over the radio. I said, "Hey, Sergeant, come on up here. I want you to take a look at this." He came up, we took up a different position and saw the guy, coming out and using the binoculars to monitor our movements. And he made the call. It was, he said, "What do you think?" I said, "It looks like, this might be the spotter." Binoculars were considered, when somebody had binoculars, that was considered hostile intent. Especially if they're using it to look at us. Those were the ROEs in Afghanistan at that time. So he made the decision, and we decided to go ahead and execute the shot.
Wow. And how often were you was it frequent that you were in gun battles on the battlefield in Afghanistan?
When we first got over there, they kind of looked at us as fresh meat. And so every day for probably a month or two was some sort of a gun battle, whether it was one of our fire teams getting engaged on a foot patrol, or we used to have this building we used to call it Building 19, and it was about 1 click south of us, which is about 1,000 meters, and they would take pot shots at us all day. They'd try and launch IDF, indirect fire, into our fob. They had a motorcycle that drove around with an AGS-17, which is like an automatic grenade launcher. Think of a machine gun that shoots grenades. And they would drive around with that on the back of a motorcycle, and they would just randomly stop and try and lob grenades into our fob from, they could be up to 1,500 meters away. And they're just trying to get them in. They never landed inside of our fob, but, you could set your watch by that, every day around between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you would have to take cover in an IDF shelter because they'd be lobbing these 40 millimeter grenades at us.
I assume in a situation like that, you don't need to go through chain of command. You can just take one of these guys out if you got a clear shot. You see that coming.
Oh yeah. We're in the Marine Corps now. I can't speak for the other branches, but in the Marine Corps, we're very much small unit leadership. So, most of our engagements are at the discretion of, the squad leader, the team leader, that's on scene.
How far was this from Kabul, or where was it, like on the map? Like I visualized the map.
Well, this was in Helmand province. So it was pretty close to the Pakistan border in the southeastern part of the country. Well, the southern part of the country. I think Kabul is more, towards the center and the eastern part of the country, like right before the mountains. So we weren't really near anything that you could even be considered remotely a civilization. The AO that we worked in, the area of operations we worked in, the Taliban limited their electricity. These people only got electricity for one or two nights a week, and only at night. They didn't have power during the day. There is no electricity. There is no running water. It was about as primitive as you could get. So, dirt roads, there's nothing paved. All the buildings are clay huts. They're built out of mud. Very well built. Extremely well built, but this wasn't like anything you would see on the news right now with Kabul and maybe like Kandahar or some of the other places that they might show you on the news. This was the wild, wild west in terms of how it looked.
And what was your stated mission there?
We were mainly there. So the first deployment, we were there in a blocking position. 2-8 was pushing out of Marja, was pushing through Marja. And, President Obama at the time had given the Taliban in Marja, well, not the Taliban, but the civilians in Marja, they had given them like an announcement. Hey, we're going to conduct operations in this village 2 or 3 weeks prior to us doing it. So when 2-8 went into, I think 3-6 also went in. When they went into this village in Marja and started pushing through, it was laced with IEDs, booby traps, all sorts of stuff like that. Because they knew for weeks that we were coming in. So the Taliban, they fled, and we were in a blocking position. We had a big wadi where they would travel through, and we were in a blocking position to the south. So we did a lot of checkpoints and stuff like that, where we were trying to roll up these bad guys. And then we also, you have a lot of drug lords that you fight over there. The poppy fields over there are very well protected. When I first went to Afghanistan, I thought our mission was to eradicate these poppy fields. We were supposed to, if you're fighting a war against the Taliban, you would think that the best way to defeat your enemy is to cut off their finances. So when we didn't cut off their finances, and we allowed this opium production, this poppy, to be grown, and not only grown, but we almost offered protection, if you will. It was just kind of mind-boggling to me why we weren't allowed to destroy these fields that we would see. So our mission was more of a blocking position, but we also did community outreach. We built a school. We built a couple wells for the local population so that they could get water. We did a lot of stuff to try and further the population there. Kind of a hearts and minds type mission.
Did you ever question why you weren't able to destroy some of these poppy fields? Because that's got a lot of conspiracy texture to it right there. Was that ever questioned?
I asked. I asked the questions, but of course, when we're working these operations, the highest ranking officer that we had on our base was a lieutenant. Which is fairly low ranking. It's a junior grade officer, and we didn't really get any clarification because he didn't know. So we just do what we were told. And at the time, it didn't seem like the end of the world. The justification was that if we take away the poppy, we are going to severely impact the community, the village that we're operating out of, and their financial resources. So, we were basically kind of turning our eye, a blind eye, to what they were doing because it was their only source of income in that village.
Because you wanted to be their friends.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if we went in there and started burning all the poppy, the village would have turned on us instantly. And we might have had issues with that. But at the same time, they also didn't like the overbearing Taliban coming in and telling them, you have to yield X amount of crop in order for us to kind of, back off of you a little bit. So they were kind of in a catch-22, the local villagers. On one hand, they want to grow the poppy, the opium, because that's what the Taliban wants from them. That's where they're able to go to the bazaar and sell it and make money. But on the other hand, they know they're just, kind of like promulgating the situation. You're just kind of enabling the Taliban even more by allowing this crop to grow. And I mean, 86% of the poppy in the United States, or the opium in the United States, comes from Afghanistan. All the heroin, all that stuff, it's coming from Afghanistan.
How much? What was the percentage?
86%.
Wow.
86%.
Wow. So 9 years after you leave Afghanistan, the last United States military service member leaves. This just happened, for those who are listening, probably in the last couple of weeks from when this will air.
But today is like 3 days after. No, today is the 1st of September, and the last serviceman left yesterday.
Yeah. So
we are doing
Brian,
it, and we are going to send this out more earlier if we possibly can.
Thanks for the clarification, Karm. So, Brian, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about this exit?
I love that we exited. I love it. I really don't think that Afghanistan, I mean, look, the country's been at war with itself. It's been a civil war with itself for centuries now. The Brits came in and tried to modernize it, if you will, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The Russians came in, did the same thing, and then America comes in, and we tried to do the same thing. That this country just does not want to be. It doesn't want to be ruled. It doesn't want to be democratized, if you will. It doesn't want to, it doesn't want to succumb to Western civilization. They just want to go about their own way. They're a nation of warring tribes, and that's all that they seem to want to be. So I quickly began to change my perception of the war in Afghanistan once I got out and kind of started looking at things from a different perspective. So I was perfectly okay with the decision to pull out. The way in which they pulled out was an absolute disaster. I don't know where the incompetence came from. I don't know who was the person that said it's a good idea to pull out the military forces, but prior to pulling out the U.S. civilians and citizens that were over there. I'm not sure where that order came from, whether it was Milley, whether it was Austin. or the president himself. I'm not sure where that came from, but the way in which they handled it was an absolute disaster.
Even I, who don't know anything about anything in this sphere, also in many other spheres.
Thank God we just got that recorded.
Yeah,
thank God.
I am coming out of the closet and admitting it, but even I realized the absurdity of the way it was set up. That they. The way they literally withdrew into this very small little pocket and they left the people all around. I mean, it was just very absurd. Even I represent the lay people who are not, savvy in military operations. It was a true blue disaster, but they are already spinning it. The media is already spinning it.
In what way? How so?
Well, those, if they were caught there, maybe they chose to be caught there. And everybody will be eventually gotten out. I think the government, Biden's government is counting on the fact that the Taliban can be bribed.
If you're one of the family, of those 13 service members who were killed, it's an unforgivable exit strategy, that's for sure. But I guess to Carmela's point, Brian, is there any way to trust the Taliban in the hands of the Afghan people? Do you trust them to do the right thing?
Under this administration, no. Under the last administration, I don't know. There was something. Obviously, I'm not a Republican, but I'm more conservative than I am liberal. Mm-hmm. So under the last administration, there was almost this sense of peace through power. You almost had this willingness to negotiate with the Trump administration because they were afraid that Trump would just come over there and destroy everything. And he never did, but they just had that sense, it was peace through power. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really irked me about the way this was handled and the way that it's being portrayed to the American people now is, yesterday after Biden's quick, speech where, of course, once again, he didn't take any questions from anybody. Jen Psaki came out and started talking about Afghanistan in a press conference. And she at one point mentioned and said something along the lines of, the American citizens over there have had since March, or maybe it was May, that they were told that they need to start figuring out how to get out of Afghanistan. They need to leave if they want to leave. And the problem with this is that at that time, in March, April, May, they weren't at the point yet where we were ready to get out. So whatever they're working on, I don't know why they chose to stay. Whatever reasoning they chose to stay, it was based on the premise that Joe said, that President Biden said, we don't see the Taliban overrunning the Afghan forces. There was this conception that the Afghan army was going to be able to hold the country, hold Kabul, hold, all these bases and these, points of interest. And the Taliban wasn't going to be able to overrun the country. And then when it started to kind of go in that direction, they were saying, oh, well, it'll probably be 90 days. At the time that they said it would be 90 days, it took 7. It took 7 days when our intelligence were telling us it would take 90. So I don't know where the failure was in that regard, but now we're finding out from Reuters, they just released a phone conversation between President Biden and Ghani, President Ghani in Afghanistan, where President Ghani is saying, we're getting our butts kicked over here. And Joe said, we need to change the public perception. So if you can work on changing the public perception into believing that you're going to be able to hold in all this, we'll see what we can do to help you out. So, it's just a dog and pony show that we're seeing over there. And you can't really trust anything that's coming out in terms of, this is why we did this. This is what happened. Now they're touting it as a success. I don't know how you tout that as a success. They're saying that the U.S. Air Force evacuated 120,000 people from Afghanistan in this short amount of time. Only 6,000 of those were American citizens. So 5% of the 120,000 people that we withdrew, 5% are American citizens. And now you have yesterday, Joe saying that 10%, President Biden, sorry, I call him Joe on my show. President Biden is now saying we left 10% of Americans over there. So you're telling me out of the 120,000 people that were on these Air Force C-17s, you couldn't fit those 10% on there. There's all sorts of stuff we're going to find out about what's coming out down there. Soldiers that were told that even if they're showing a U.S. passport, turn them away. We can't take people in right now. So
and
we'll see. This is just a big cluster.
And what about all the equipment?
You could get into some conspiracy theories about all the equipment.
Yeah, I heard some rumors.
We saw those guys in Blackhawks, I think, the Taliban.
I heard rumors that they were giving it as a present to Pakistan. And did you hear the same?
Karm, who are your sources? You can give them up to Brian and I.
Well, I have my sources. I can't reveal my sources.
But what, they were a gift, you're saying, from the United States to the Taliban?
Not to the Taliban, to the Pac. I didn't even get it completely how, on what grounds. But the equipment, basically, they were conscious that they left it there, and they left it there for Pakistan as a parting gift. Now, part of this allegedly will go to Iran too.
It's like The Price is Right. Well, you get a parting gift.
I don't know. I don't know how much is going to disperse to other countries in quantity. I would imagine the Taliban is going to try.
In technology.
Well, that's the key. There you hit the nail on the head right there, is the technology. So we have classified technology in all of our equipment. From our trucks to our helicopters to our planes. That? They took a PC-12, which is a top secret surveillance aircraft with all sorts of, surveillance capabilities on it. They have one of those now. And the problem with this is all you have to do is sell a little piece of the technology to China, Russia, Iran, any of these other countries, and they'll pay top dollar for it. And, something, Donald Trump was interviewed by Dan Ball for OANN the other night, and there was something that Trump said in that interview that struck with me, and that was that don't think for a second now China isn't already hands-on with some of this classified technology that was in these vehicles. And don't think for a second, and this is me saying this, not Trump, but don't think for a second that China doesn't have think tanks with thousands of people. Thousands. That's not an exaggeration. You have a country with billions of people in a communist, society where they're essentially working for the government. There's think tanks that are taking this technology apart, trying to reverse engineer it, trying to figure out how to apply it to the battlefield. One of the examples I gave in my podcast was this thing called a Blue Force tracker. Now, a Blue Force tracker it's kind of like a computer screen inside of our Humvees or inside of our trucks on the passenger side, and it displays the battlefield, if you will. It tells you, it's a map. It's like a GPS. And on that GPS is the other friendly forces in the AO in your area. So you can see, Charlie companies operating over here, Bravo companies operating over here. Now, if you can figure out a way to hack into that system, because it has some sort of connection if it's talking between vehicles, if you can figure out a way to hack into that system, you can now, instead of Bravo company being here, Bravo company could be all the way over here. And, Alpha company tries to go over to Bravo company for whatever it might be, and they get ambushed. Or, you can also do call for fire on Blue Force tracker. So you do a call for fire on the wrong place. There's all sorts of things that could happen. And that's just one piece of technology in a truck. That's not even really, I don't even know if that's classified.
But Brian, why did they make this? Why did they hand this information over?
That's one of the biggest questions I have. Now, one of the things we know as Marines, and any Marine that's listening to this, and probably any soldier, sailor, or airman will tell you that we are OCD about accountability of gear. Mm-hmm. I mean, every time we would move someplace from one place to another, this isn't in combat. This is just like in garrison. Anytime we would move from one place to another and we were, carrying rifles and all that stuff, we would do what's called an EDL. And we would have to, every single Marine in our unit would have to read off their serial numbers to the platoon sergeant so that they could get gear accountability. So to tell me that we were planning on leaving Afghanistan and we just left behind $85 billion worth of equipment, aircraft that made the Taliban now the 26th largest air force in the world.
Unbelievable.
To tell me that we just left it behind, there needs to be people resigning. There needs to be people that are relieved of their command, because this is gross negligence.
No,
absolute gross negligence.
No, I think it's, well, I'm paranoid. So
you think what? What do you think?
I think it's intentional too.
What? Yes.
Yeah.
I do think it didn't happen by accident. I think, I think that there must be something else going on here. They cannot be that desperately dumb.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, there's the TAPI pipeline that's going through, connecting, Eastern Asia, Western Asia with Europe. So there could be some implications with that. You hear the word pipeline and you automatically think Burisma, but I haven't been able to find any connections between the TAPI pipeline and Burisma, but that's something that immediately pops into mind.
Well, this brings me to the next question.
Well, you just cut off my question, but go ahead, Karm.
Who cares?
Go ahead, Karm. You're on a roll.
Anyway,
You're on a roll.
No, this really is my question. I have been in this country since 1961 when I married his father. So I went through, different stages of my life and different, feelings and about
Speed it up, Karm.
and so forth. But right now, in due respect to the President of the United States, I think something is, and I am a psychologist basically by trade, I think something is not right. But you cannot put it on him, because he's not making all the decisions all by himself. The question is, who else is making the decisions, and what will happen next with Biden?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't think he's making many decisions at all right now. I honestly don't. I don't think that his cognitive capability is up to speed. I don't think that there's something wrong with him. He just announced today he's going back to Delaware, for another, whatever you want to call it, weekend in Delaware. This is like an ongoing thing. Even when Afghanistan kicked off, they claimed he was in Camp David, but they're putting up fake photos of him at Camp David and passing them off as he's keeping tabs on everything.
You're referring to the clock being off, right? It was a different time zone.
Yeah, so when Afghanistan first kicked off,
this would have
let Brian explain it. There was a picture of Biden.
No, but
hold on, let Brian explain it.
Okay, sorry.
So, sorry. There's a picture of Biden that's allegedly at Camp David, and he's watching the television. He's got 4 or 5 different people supposed to be having some sort of communication, but they slipped up. They have up at the top above the TVs, you can see, I think it's like 6 clocks, starting with the US, London, Moscow, Tehran, and I can't remember the last 2. But if you look at the clocks, the clock for London and Moscow are 3 hours apart. The problem with that is that Moscow doesn't do daylight savings, London does. So they haven't been 3 hours apart since the end of March. So they're trying to pass this off as, it was 2 weeks ago. They're trying to pass this off as Joe is sitting here in a command center, fully engaged in what's going on in Afghanistan. But the picture that they used was actually from sometime in March. Now, there are people out there, and I haven't confirmed this myself, but there are people out there that have, done different editing techniques on the picture and found that what was put on the screen is also fake. Now that I haven't confirmed, but the timing on the clocks is confirmed as fake. Well, not from 2 weeks ago.
Well, it was bizarre in the first place. It was bizarre. He just dropped into Washington to make a 15-minute or 10-minute speech and then dropped out again and flew right back.
Right. Why didn't he do that from Camp David? Camp David has every capability that the White House has for the most part.
No, so but I think he didn't do it because it's a summer resort and he wanted to make it like overly professional. That I would understand. But I didn't understand why the hell did he come back and went right back?
Right. That's the big question.
When Rome is burning, he went back.
Correct.
We've got only about a half hour left with Brian, and I wish I booked him for like 3 hours. So I want to get through a bunch of things. Number one, tell us a little bit about CanCon. What is it? And tell me about your podcast. How do you get into this?
So, all right. So the Cannabis Conservative, I was actually in a documentary called Unprescribed. And Unprescribed, it was a documentary by a gentleman named Steve Elmore at Allegiance Films. And he basically followed around a few servicemen and women that began using cannabis as a treatment option rather than all the zombie dope that the VA tries to prescribe to you. I took up cannabis about 5 years ago. I started using cannabis for PTSD. Never smoked before that. I'm 37 now. I started when I was about 31 or 32. Never smoked pot before that. Never even really thought about trying it. Wasn't against it. Just never tried it. And then one day my buddy said, "Here, try this. I heard it's really good for PTSD." And I was like, all right. So, I tried it and it was phenomenal. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. I was laughing, joking, I felt good. So ever since then, I've, pretty much used cannabis instead of some of the drugs that the VA would have normally prescribed to, kind of self-medicate from all this. I do it socially too. It's not, strictly medicinal. But I love it. It's got no chance of overdose. Nobody has ever overdosed on marijuana ever in history. There's no hangover. There's no major side effects. I mean, about the only bad thing about it is you get the munchies a lot. So, I came up with the podcast Cannabis Conservative because back last year, right around the time George Floyd passed away, was murdered, I kind of started talking about stuff on my Facebook, on my social media, nothing professional or anything like that. And I started kind of trying to convince people that we need to start looking at politics as people that aren't in a party. Politics has become like sports right now. It's like you're either the Green Bay Packers or the Chicago Bears. If you're a Republican, you're the Bears. If you're a Democrat, you're the Packers, or vice versa. And people ride or die with these teams no matter what. And it got to the point where every single thing that was happening in society was partisan in some way. If you thought George Floyd was murdered, you were a Democrat. If you thought George Floyd wasn't murdered, you were a Republican. If you're for masks, you're a Democrat. If you're against masks, you're a Republican. Vaccines. If you're for vaccines, you're a Democrat. And it got so bad. And I was just trying to I was just trying to get rid of this labeling that we have of you're either, an R or D. And I think the best way to do that was to show something like Cannabis Conservative. Two things that don't typically go together. And then what I started finding out as my channel, eventually I grew into a YouTube channel. And what I started to find out was that, especially in terms of cannabis and conservatism, they don't necessarily butt heads as much as people think. It's just the conservatives are afraid to admit that they do it. They're either afraid to say I smoke pot, or they're saying, I don't care if you smoke pot, like do whatever you want to do. Like, doesn't bother me.
But isn't that generational too? Like,
I think so, but here's the thing: is it's funny that you bring up generational, because if anything, it's my generation that's kind of the ones that are like, that's the devil's lettuce. The people that are in their 60s and 70s, they grew up in the 60s and 70s, and it was normal to them. So they're kind of like, they're the ones that do it in the closet. They just. If you've ever seen the movie Half Baked, there's a scene where it's like an angsty 16-year-old smoking pot, and then the father, they zoom out on the house and you see the father on the roof smoking pot, and they're saying you have a son that can't connect with his dad and a dad that can't connect with their son, and they're smoking pot trying to figure out how to connect. And it's like, boom, there it is.
Yeah, my dad's about 80. He's going to be 88 this year. About 10 years ago, he's like, "Hey, Joel, you think you can get me some grass?" He calls it grass from the 60s. I got Mike Littman's brother to get him a joint, and he's got shaky hands, drops a joint on the sheets in bed. My mom screamed at him. He had to put it out. It was an absolute disaster, but maybe
I am paranoid. Keep that always in the back of your mind. So when we smoked, I put wet towels on the bathroom door. So, I mean, it's like stupid, but I am paranoid.
You need to smoke more weed, Karm.
Yeah, I think I would probably have less of a high blood pressure.
This is the most mellow I've seen her. So, Brian, one quick thing you were telling me, and this is interesting because I was listening to our competitor, Joe Rogan, and I'm coming to get you, Rogan. But I was listening to Rogan, and he had a guy named Jimmy Dore, who's an interesting character. He's a big lefty. He's a comedian, but he's got a big following. And anyway, he was outraged with what's going on with YouTube, Facebook, Twitter censorship. And his argument was, in this day and age, it's a utility, like a phone. Like in 1980, you couldn't have a business without a phone. Well, today you can't have a business without Facebook or Twitter. You yourself were censored, right? And what's that done to you?
What happened?
Yeah,
First, tell me what happened before you tell me what it has done to you.
So ironically, when we did that interview here at my house, I went that night to go see Joe Rogan live at the BB&T Center. So actually, it was an excellent show. I mean, he's hilarious. But yeah, so we as we started growing our platforms, we kind of networked with some other patriots. We were talking a lot. Everything really picked up after the general election. And we kind of linked together with a small network of patriots that were doing the same thing, citizen journalism. We were talking to people that most people weren't talking to. We were interviewing people that that the mainstream media wouldn't talk to. And these were all people that were directly involved in what was going on. And so we had a hit piece essentially put out on us. We grew our platforms really big. I mean, some of us in our network had over 150,000 followers. Some guys were 200,000. One guy had 500,000. So we had a network of maybe 10 to 15 guys. And then all of a sudden on June 14th, this organization called Media Matters puts out a hit piece on us, literally names us by name. 15 of us, lists us all off. They go through and, they talk about YouTube. They call out YouTube for allowing us to have platforms, for not censoring us. Never once mention how they say we're promoting the big lie and lying and all that. Never once challenge anything that we ever said, never challenge us on fact, just ad hominem attacks. So that comes out on June 14th. On June 15th, overnight, the top 3 names, the biggest names on our list, there's, I think, 13 names on the list. The top 3 names are banned from YouTube overnight, the very night that happened. Within the next 2 or 3 days, the top 10 names were all either banned or suspended. Now, I mean, we're what now? June, July, August. In August, there's only one name that was on that list that still has a YouTube channel. Out of 13
about you?
Of them.
Were you suspended or were you banned?
We were banned permanently. And a lot of us, like the first 3 names, they were instantly banned. No warnings, no nothing, just gone, just overnight.
And this is a guy who a guy who basically put his life on the line for the country. Now a bunch of pussies at YouTube are going to censor him.
Wait a minute, let's backtrack 1 second. I tried to listen. You were once interviewed after January 6th. You were once interviewed on somebody else's podcast. I went on Google, okay? I didn't have secret ways. And then I also listened to your own podcast because I was anxious, full disclosure, I was anxious that you would start to, that you would be really into white supremacy or, something like that. I didn't know, okay? I have a right. I'm paranoid.
Let me stop you for 1 second right there. Of the top 3 names, 2 of the top 3 names are Black Americans. One is a Black 19-year-old kid, and the other one is a 35-year-old Black man. And I've met both of them in person, and they are phenomenal people. There's absolutely no white supremacy, no hatred, nothing.
Brian, I apologize for my mother. She's a Holocaust survivor.
But isn't it good to clarify these things and put them on record? It's good to clarify.
It's good you're being honest.
Because they're always saying, "Oh, these dudes are all white supremacists. They are the ones."
It's a stereotype. It is a stereotype.
It's a stereotype on the left about the right.
Correct.
Okay.
it's funny
so
because
I clarified that on my own before we talked to you, okay? I clarified that by listening to what you had to say on that podcast, what you had to say on your own podcast.
So, Brian, what can be done now to stop the censorship? Because these are, say it.
I think before you go to the censorship, I think it's a brilliant idea that to get out of the two parties, okay, and go independent. Call it whatever you want to call it.
Well, the irony of the two parties, it's almost like Afghanistan. It's tribal, right? We become tribal in a lot of ways.
No, but we can create a third powerful non-tribe.
Doesn't have to just be a third.
I'm all for
Brian,
it. I'm totally for this revolution, Brian.
So, Brian, what
totally
do you
am.
Pick up your arms, Karm, and fight with Brian?
Did you tell him I learned how to shoot?
She did learn how to shoot. Hey, maybe you'll take us shooting one day?
Absolutely.
Would you? You take me and Karm shooting? That's awesome.
Okay.
I love it.
I'm also an NRA certified instructor, so
beautiful.
I've got
that's great. I would love that.
Certifications.
We're definitely doing that. We're going to videotape that. That'll be our. Karm was trying to think of a theme, like a message for our podcast. Maybe it's like
no. We were talking on the way here, and I dare to say something that he immediately. No, I don't. Like, what's our message? I happen to love life in all its varieties. Really love it, and I like from the janitor to the whatever, from the black to the white to the.
You know what your message is? It should be. She said something ridiculous, which
I'm not even embarrassed. I am not embarrassed of being ridiculous. I said life is beautiful should be our message.
Our message,
cherish life.
The theme should be something like Holocaust surviving, gun-toting, ass-kicking grandma is what it should be, right, Brian? That's how you get some. That's how you get some subscribers.
In any case, I one more thing I have to say, and then I'll truly.
Now Brian's like, how the hell did I get into this? All right, go on, Karm. Make it quick. So we have 13 minutes. I want to cover.
Now I forgot.
Okay.
Wait a second.
While she's remembering, she has senior moments. Two quick questions. Well, the first one: what do we do about this censorship? Is there a way to stop it? I mean, how do you fight YouTube?
That's what I wanted to say.
Can you let him speak?
You find alternative platforms. So I have a platform right now that I'm on. It's called Locals, and the channel is right down there, cancon.locals.com. But it's a Miami-based platform. It is behind a sign-up wall, so you have to sign up for it.
I signed up
YouTube.
for it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But it's funny because it's growing tremendously fast. So when I was on YouTube, I had, I think like 40 or 50,000 subscribers. I'm not sure how many it was, but it was plateaued. Like I was done growing. Mm-hmm. No matter how much I shared it, no matter how many likes I had, no matter how many people shared it, never grew more subscribers. And I would get emails from people constantly. Hey, I was unsubscribed to you. I had to resubscribe. Mm-hmm. And I was getting this from people daily that would email me and say, I don't know why, but I was unsubscribed from you. So I think, there's a shadow ban thing kind of going on there. Since I moved over to Locals, I'm growing like 1,000 subscribers a week, which is unheard of on a small platform like that has a sign up wall. So you have to sign up for it in order to be able to watch the video. And I'm growing 1,000 a week.
You're killing me now, Brian. You're killing me.
Well, that tells me that something was going on with YouTube where they were censoring us and keeping us down. And to be honest with you, when that Media Matters piece came out, I just wanted to be able to kind of limp my way because I had my Locals platform back then too. So I kind of wanted to be able to limp my way to the 2022 midterms because I knew from a business perspective, I knew if I had YouTube for the 2022 elections, Facebook is no longer doing political ads. So all that ad revenue that was going to be generated through Facebook was now going to be subverted to YouTube. So I knew being a conservative and having a decent platform on YouTube, I knew if I could limp my way to 2022, I would be able to make a very successful operation, through the midterm election in terms of ad revenue. So I started taking my controversial content when I would talk about COVID, vaccines, the election, any of that stuff I would take to Locals. And then on YouTube, I would stick to the more mainstream type stuff like, the president's election, like I'm not his election, the CARES package, that kind of stuff, the eviction moratorium. I would do the stuff that YouTube shouldn't be censoring. Well, they shouldn't be censoring anything, but
no, but the censoring business is very scary. I tell you why. I mentioned this before, but I think you should know that I grew up in after World War II Yugoslavia, when Tito was a communist and he was ruling the country. He wasn't bad as Stalin or the others in Russia, but it was a communist, absolute power, one party election, and so on and so forth. So I adore the concept of free speech more than, that's for me is a very important thing. And I don't think we have it. I heard that the Taliban have platforms on
they're on YouTube.
Oh no, on Facebook, right?
They're on Twitter.
Yeah, they have Twitter, so and they're not censored on that. It's
Can you believe that?
That's unreal.
Can you believe that? I try to stay out. The Republicans are writing to me every day. We need money for this. Because of you, we will not be reelected. I don't do anything. I'm like dead. I don't respond. But
yeah, I don't donate money to any platforms.
Because I would join this group of people who are neither this nor that.
Karm, you should start smoking weed.
I won't support like the RNC. I won't support any of that. I'll support individual candidates. And that's one of the problems. You were talking earlier about how do we get away from the party system, and we're never going to get away from the two-party system until we have severe and extreme campaign reform. Because right now, you or I can only donate. I think right now we're up to $2,800. It goes up $100 every general election. It goes up. You can donate $100 more. So I think right now, you or I as a citizen can donate like $2,800 to a particular candidate. However, you can have political action committees that are funded by corporations that can donate as much as they want. So you have politicians that can only get X amount of dollars from the constituents, but they can get as much as they want from corporations. Who do you think they're going to be accountable to when they're in office? Are they going to care about, Brian and Camilla and Joel, or are they going to care about, Facebook that just gave them $25 million?
100%. Two quick things.
And until we get rid of that, we're not going to get rid of the two-party system in America.
Only a couple minutes left. I want to get to two quick things. Number one, January 6th. What were your thoughts on that real quickly, Ryan?
I was actually in DC on January 6th. Mm-hmm. I did not go to the Capitol. I was actually, to your point there, I was actually there with a 6'6" black guy that I'm really good friends with down here. And him and I and the woman that linked us together, actually, Joel, she was up there with us, the three of us. And, mm-hmm. We had a great time. We didn't go to the Capitol, of course. Mm-hmm. I don't know that the Capitol was everything that, they're trying to push it out to be. I think there were absolutely embedded people that pushed the crowd into that direction, and then the crowd just kind of followed. Mm-hmm. It was, I don't think it was the MAGA crowd that initiated everything. I think the MAGA crowd followed into the Capitol. And, until we have all the footage and until we can go through the 14,000 hours of footage that the Capitol refuses to release, we're never going to know what really happened. There's footage of Trump supporters yelling, "Stop Antifa, stop Antifa," like calling people out that are doing these certain things. The first people that made it into the Capitol, 9 people wearing all black, head to toe. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things about the Capitol that don't really sit well with me just yet.
Last question. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. What's that mean to you personally, especially having, fought for the country?
Oh man, like 5 years ago, I would have said I would have stood up and saluted. But, after some of the rabbit holes I've gone down now, I just don't know anymore. There's just so many questions that I have now. Now, do I believe, in terms of why 9/11 happened, I have questions. In terms of the, 2,977, I think it was, Americans that died on that day, My heart goes out to them and their families. I still remember being a senior in high school and sitting there and watching it, hearing it come over the radio that a plane hit the Twin Towers, one of the towers. And then we were like, okay, like a little Cessna or something. We got to our next classroom and we see that it's the whole building's on fire. And then, 5 minutes later, we watched the plane in real time crash into it. And, it just, the emotions that it stirred inside of me. Now, one thing I will say, I wish we could get back to that patriotism that we had for the 3 or 4 months, maybe 5-6 months after 9/11. We lost that as Americans somehow, and we're back at each other's throats.
Yeah, that has been completely lost. I actually covered a story last night. A week ago, you may have heard about this. Some dude high on mushrooms on South Beach randomly goes up and just tries to kill a 1-year-old. The dad's like, that's my son, turns a gun on the father, shoots him in the head for no reason.
A 21-year-old from Colorado on vacation.
The reason I bring it up is I spoke to a priest who was at this 1-week vigil yesterday, and that's exactly what he said. He's like, we've totally lost ourselves in this country. And the last time we were kind of cohesive was after 9/11. Everyone was on the same team, and we've totally lost that. But Brian, listen, it was awesome having you on. The only reason
I just want to ask you,
here
please.
Karm, by the way, is the queen. This is why I actually left about 3 minutes of pad because every time I
would
rap,
like to know, where were you born?
I was born and raised down here in South Florida.
All right. I just wanted to kind of visualize you.
Karm, how do you think I would have done in Afghanistan?
If I go with you, you would be taken care of.
think I would have been scared.
It's not that bad. He has a wife and 3 children, and he's okay.
I probably would have been. You know what?
You would have been fine. It really wasn't. It wasn't the craziest or scariest thing. And I was, an infantry guy. If you were anything other than infantry, it would have been like not too bad.
Yeah, infantry. I don't know about, but I don't know, man. I heard.
You have a wild part too, where you kind of get like.
I would have probably gotten killed over there doing something stupid. But anyway,
run out and throw a grenade to be heroic and be videotaped.
As much as I'd like to make it about me, I can't. Brian, tell everyone the name of the podcast and where they can find it again.
Yeah, sure. It's cancon.locals.com, cancon.locals.com. There is a sign up wall, but all the content's free. I never charge for anything. If you want to donate, there is an option to donate. Like, I think it's $3 a month, and it does go directly to me to support what I do.
Which people should be supporting, Brian. You also work at the VA a little bit, right?
No. I don't do any. I work with, I have my own, I'm also an artist on the side. And then, I work with a veteran nonprofit down here when I can, which hasn't been much lately.
All right. Well, listen, we loved having you on.
Yes.
We're going to take you up on shooting some guns. Is that cool?
For sure.
All right, man.
Anytime.
I told you, what did I tell you? Don't say if you don't mean it.
I 100% mean it. And we're going to videotape this whole thing.
I'm still trying to educate.
Brian, thank you for your service to the country.
So much, Brian.
Thanks
for your service.
And no, he does not sleep with a hood on. You don't have to be afraid of Brian Lupo.
I'm relieved.
Yes.
I was relieved.
Yes, please. We got to get that conception of like this conservative movement.
That was the reason I brought it up, because I verified my data before, but that was the reason I brought up, because there is that misconception. I feel there is sure, there are some fringe elements somewhere in some forest somewhere practicing to kill,
Yeah, but that's on both sides. That's not just conservatives. There's both sides that are doing that same thing.
All right, Brian, you're a badass, a hero to me, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate being here.
We'll be right back with a new schmooze.
All right. Best.
Welcome back. It's time for the news schmooze.
What do you think of Corporal Brian Lupo put his life on the line for our country? I'll tell you what I think.
What?
And he's an absolute badass. And not only that, I mean, he's brave. He's heroic.
What does it mean, badass?
He put his life on the line. He went into a war zone and brave. He's brave, but he's also
I don't know what the word badass means because there is the word bad in it.
But he's also very intelligent.
No question. He is a thoughtful person, and he's also very passionate. And interestingly enough, he says that he doesn't think that there should be two parties that are fighting each other.
Right.
He is passionate about politics.
And he has behind that manly beard, he's got a sweet little face, right?
Well, I didn't shave him off to check his sweet little face. He has beautiful eyes.
I think she's hitting on you, Brian. Anyway, on to the first story for the news schmooze, which correlates directly with what Brian was just talking about. Instagram apparently, quote unquote, incorrectly and quote unquote, temporarily deleted an account belonging to the mother of Lance Corporal Kareem Nakui. He's one of the 13 U.S. service members killed in Afghanistan. The mother, Shannak Chappelle, said in a Monday Facebook post that her Instagram account had been deleted after she posted a tribute to her son, saying it was because she gained, quote unquote, so many followers after her son's death, quote unquote, due to President Biden's negligence. What is going on with the censorship? It's actually making me nervous. So you're talking a woman who lost her son
more than nervous.
As a Holocaust survivor.
It should make you more than nervous. And I kind of cannot get it through my head how the big tech.
Well, during that interview, I was thinking, we're talking to Brian. Brian's been banned by YouTube. Are we now going to have problems with YouTube? Now you have to worry about this. Now I feel like you, Carmela. Now I feel like you.
I mean, rightly
I never would have been paranoid.
By association, you can become a suspect, okay?
Do you think we're going to get banned before we ever get started?
That would be very funny because then we would really get followers.
How the hell are we going to get? I want 1 million plus followers.
Joel, you are persevering as usual.
This story I thought was super interesting too. This is something else that came up with Brian. January 6th. Listen to this one. There's been the mysterious disappearance of lawyer John Pierce. Do you know who he is?
No.
He is representing more defendants than anyone else in the Capitol Hill riot. He is the single most defendants in this case, and he's disappeared. The young associate who took his place said that Mr. Pierce had, quote unquote, a conflict. At the time, no one seemed to give it much mind, but in the days that followed, Mr. Pierce, who's defending more cases connected to the riot than any other lawyer, missed additional hearings, and the reasons for his absence started changing. On Wednesday, his associate told a judge in one case that Mr. Pierce had gotten COVID-19 and was in the hospital on a ventilator. But after telling a prosecutor in another case that Mr. Pierce had been in a car accident, that same evening, a different associate told a reporter that Mr. Pierce had in fact been hospitalized, but was getting care for dehydration and exhaustion. He has 17 Capitol riot cases on his docket, and they don't know where this guy is. The New York Times tried to reach him, could not get a hold of him, and they say that his unexplained absence is the latest twist in this role of his as a defendant of people like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Karm, what is going on here?
First of all, just for the record.
This isn't weird?
Just for the record, this will keep us on YouTube. I think the January 6th invasion of the Capitol was the worst thing that happened internally other than 9/11. I think it was... Are
you saying 9/11 was a conspiracy, an inside job?
No. That was a horrible day, and this was a horrible day. But I mean, I'm counting it only since 1961. I'm in this country since 1961.
Am I too naive to think that something could happen? The government wouldn't do something to this guy? Am I naive to think that?
You mean hit by a car? You know what? We will interview a retired CIA agent, and we are definitely going to ask him.
Yeah.
And he will say to you, we are not in charge of anybody in the country. That's the FBI.
That is the great Mark Polymeropoulos, who is a future guest on our show, who has a book out called Clarity in Crisis. He is one of the most decorated CIA agents in history.
It would be like if it would be in the army, he would be considered the general.
Correct. Moving on here to another disturbing story. A Chicago judge reversed his decision that stripped an unvaccinated mother of her parental rights over her 11-year-old son. Now, look, I'm all for vaccinations. I'm pro-vax, I guess you would say.
And you are vaccinated yourself?
I am. But to take a child away from a mother who doesn't want to be vaccinated, what the fuck is going on?
It must be one deranged judge. And it must be completely, it cannot be a trend. Must be, but.
By the way, Mr. Pierce, the missing lawyer, if you're out there and you're listening to my podcast in Pakistan or Brazil, hit me up. We'd love to have you on as a guest. It might get us some followers.
You only have to be on Zoom. You don't have to come personally.
Karm, do I need to be more paranoid about our government and our country? I thought
my son, to be my true son, you have to become paranoid because you cannot relate to me otherwise. It's very, 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 very possible. Things are very possible. Witnesses get hit by cars.
I was just accident. Lost in thought, wondering if I actually...
I cannot believe it that you weren't asking some silly out of extraterrestrial questions. Today you asked real political questions.
You think they get to sleep in late in Afghanistan on like a Saturday or Sunday? Not really.
I don't think so. I think they pray 5 times a day, the Muslims.
I'm talking about Brian Lupo. I'd get real tired there, I think.
I think you would have to accommodate yourself with feather pillows and...
you think I could do that? Bring in a feathered comforter?
You could do it. Believe me, you could do it. Don't play it down.
We'll be right back with 3 questions for Grandma and the end of the podcast.
It's time now for 3 questions for Grandma.
And we are back for the final segment. It was a toss-up this week. Do we do This Week in Dead and Dying, or do we do 3 questions for Grandma? We'll do kind of a mishmash of both. So, of course, Carmela, when we're off air, I call you and I tell you I'm starting my kettlebell workout. And that turns into a 20-minute diatribe from you on your trainer's brother, son's aunt, uncle who started working out, was 58 years old with a trainer, and suddenly their trainer's aunt's uncle's brother's aunt's uncle's brother, who's 30, is now pissing black liquid and has to immediately go to the hospital because he's in kidney failure. And I'll tell you how this all circles back to me. I'm out of shape because now, as a Jew who listens to his...
Always blames the Jews. Even
as a Jewish kid who listens to his mother, now I just don't work out because I'm afraid I'm going to go into kidney failure. So I stay fat and skinny at the same time. And everything I do, I have to worry that I could potentially die. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan, the Italian who I'm trying to catch up to with the podcast, he's injecting everything and is... God knows what into his body. He's on steroids, he's on HGH, he's doing this, he's doing that. And you know what? He's pretty fit.
You want to know something? What does his mother say?
Probably doesn't give a shit and says, oh, Joe, do whatever you want.
Come on.
But, I mean, I literally now have to think about if my kidneys are going to fail if I work out too hard.
That's correct.
Anyone else sickly?
The 5th.
You're taking the 5th. You're pleading the 5th. On to 3 questions for Grandma.
That was funny.
I'll start with, I guess, the least controversial question first. And these are actual questions from my kids now know that we do this, and they come up to me with questions. The first one, why does your beard hair turn gray? Although I don't see any, but why?
You don't see any?
No, it looks fine to me.
It's very gray, Joel. I would say it's more than 60% gray.
Why does beard hair turn gray?
I guess the pigmentation cells don't function well anymore or something like that. I don't exactly know, but that would be probably the closest approximation to the possibility.
By the way, the third question is, I love it.
Don't ask the third question.
I am. A second question.
I don't know what it is, but if you love it, don't ask it.
Second question. How does blood get in your body?
There's a big pump.
It's a good question. How does it get in there?
It's formed in your body when you're little.
I know the answer.
What is the answer?
It's formed in your body when you're little.
When you are an embryo.
It's interesting how these kids' brains work. Now, this one is from Zizi, the wild child, the middle one.
Who's 5.5.
Who's 5.5.
Going on 10.
Her question, and this is a direct quote here. What's in your penis balls?
No, that's very important.
She wants to know if there is pee in your penis balls.
No.
Would you what would you say to her?
The urine comes from the kidneys.
Okay, and what comes from the penis balls, as she calls it?
I think the babies.
By the way, as a side note,
I won't
mention any specific names, but
don't
one of
do
my
this.
My only son goes to school, even though he's 2, and he is in class with the grandson of a United States senator.
No.
And every day, I ask him if he's kicked. He's 2. I've asked him if he's kicked the senator's grandson in the nuts yet, and my son thinks it's the funniest thing. And Zizi every day now.
See how mature my son is?
One day he's going to kick this guy in the nuts.
No, one day this guy is 6'4" will kick you in the nuts.
Anyway, ending on a very somber, sad note. I'd like to dedicate this podcast to Josh Mitnick. A very, very old friend. I've known him since
very young man.
1977, I believe I've known Josh.
Old-time friend.
He passed away this week after a battle with cancer. He was a journalist, unlike myself. I just play one on TV, but Josh was a real journalist, covered Israeli politics, stuff going on in Palestine. Life ain't fair, man. He was a triathlete, a huge Michigan football fan.
He lived for Michigan. When he was there, he was the editor of the...
I just can't wrap my head around this.
But the most important thing about... we called him just Mitnick for short. His first name was Josh. Most outstanding that he was one of these people truly didn't have a badly intentioned or nasty or... Right?
Just a sweet guy. Someone that you want your...
smart and sweet and knew how to write and lives behind a wonderful family, beautiful 3 children and
I've started
at 50 of cancer.
By the way, I mean, why? Because as the gates of Neela were closing, we didn't pound our chest hard enough.
Like Roy always says to me, there are no whys. I would also like to know
there are no whys because there's just no whys, I guess. But anyway... I started a phrase in my house now, be like Josh, to my kids. Be nice, be kind, be compassionate, be sweet.
And live longer than him.
Yes, I hope.
Don't be completely like him.
Anything else, Karm? Usually you like to go on, but it's time to wrap things up.
Sorry to have everybody with this sad note, but... we watched on Zoom this terrible new tradition. We watched the funeral on Zoom, and we were all bleary-eyed. And
Karm, when I asked if there's anything else, generally you should be like, "No, that's good. Let's go." But just could never stop talking. On that note, love you.
Love you. Bye-bye.